We're into the home stretch of the Kentucky Derby Prep Trail. Let's talk about that news and graded stakes action on this episode of the Win Place Show. Salutations and welcome, friends. I'm your host of this episode of the Win Place Show. My name is Matthew DeSantis, and you can find me on Twitter at the handle at Failed to Menace. And this is an episode of the Win Place Show that is focused on all of the news in horse racing and handicapping that is proudly part of the Trust the Profits YouTube network. Speaking of that, make sure to press that subscribe button and make sure to follow us on YouTube here at Trust the Profits. We have so much horse racing content for you, from our weekly shows like Doubling Down with Colin Sheehan, the Thursday Night Lounge with El Hombre, the Win Place Show with me. You got the Formula doing his graded stakes previews. You have Capping the Card that I'm doing on a weekly basis, as well as other graded stakes previews that we have. So we have so much different content, whether you're into the Derby Trail or just a horse racing fan in general, or a bettor that just enjoys seeing other people's handicapping and betting strategies. We have something for you here on Trust the Profits. So like I said, make sure to press that subscribe button. Make sure to like this video and comment below with what's your biggest takeaway from racing this last weekend, and maybe what Derby prep race are you most looking forward to next week. Well, last weekend, we had a little bit of a downtime, right? The NCAA tournament. I was super excited. My little alma mater of Furman University, Fighting Paladins, got a huge first round win over the University of Virginia and had their one shining moment in the first round. I was going nuts. Not many people go to Furman. It's a small little private school in Greenville, South Carolina, but it's a family school. My dad went there. I went there. My brother and sister went there. My cousin Lauren went there. So we all love the Paladins, and to see them blow up on the national stage was really awesome. But with the NCAA tournament, horse racing took a little bit of a backseat, but there were still some great races that I want to recap and talk about. And obviously, we have a lot to get ready for next week, as we have a ton of Derby prep races. And really, this is that final home stretch from now until April 8th, when you have those big Kentucky Derby prep trail races, with ones coming up next week in Louisiana Fairgrounds, Sunland Park, even the UAE Derby, as well, and the Jeff Ruby Stakes, as well as then the following week with the Wood Memorial, the Arkansas Derby, the Santa Anita Derby, and then you got the Bluegrass the week after that. So much stuff going on. Like I said, let's dive into what happened this last weekend. And there were still some really great races, particularly at Oaklawn Park. So let's start there. And let's start with the Whitmore Stakes, which was a really great race and a super impressive victory for TEJANO Twist, who is a horse I've always been a sucker for. I've always really liked that horse, but he's got an unusual style in sprint races, in that he's a dead closer. I mean, you know exactly where he's going to be early in a sprint race, which is usually dead last or close to it. And then he kind of winds up and comes running at the end. It's a dangerous type of horse to bet on, I think, just because you never know what type of pace setup you're going to get in a particular race. And I think sometimes betting on a closer in a sprint race is always a little bit of the roll of the dice, particularly if you're getting a low price, which is what you typically get on TEJANO Twist now. I think he ended up going off at 9-5 right before post time. So it's a bet that maybe sometimes makes you feel uneasy, because there are other things that are contingent upon it. But let me tell you something. He got a nice pace set up, but it wasn't the sort of suicidal pace that I thought it might be. On the Whitmore preview stakes show that I did, I mentioned that he typically runs into paces that are like 21-3 and 44-2. Like, if he gets that pace up front, he typically runs really, really well, and he typically has something to close into. Well, interestingly enough, a horse like Cogburn goes out to the lead, obviously, and a couple of other horses, Edge to Edge, another horse that goes out to the lead. But Pirate Rick kind of tries to rate a little bit. I thought he might be a little bit more forwardly placed. There were a couple of other horses that I thought might try to be a little bit more forward that weren't. So the pace was fast, but it wasn't obscene by any stretch. It wasn't anything that would be, considered suicidal. It was 22-45, which is completely reasonable for a 6 furlong sprint. But TEJANO Twist just got rolling early and just had way too much for everybody else. Miles Ahead ended up finishing second. Edge to Edge, I thought, ran a really nice race, actually, because he was on that pace, pushing Cogburn. He ended up finishing third. Cogburn finishing a little further back, really fourth through eighth were kind of all bunched together. They kind of finished all within about a head of each other. So that was kind of an interesting dynamic. But So, like I said, super impressive effort there from Tejano Twist, and really has turned into one of our better dirt sprint horses, I think, and certainly a very reliable horse, winning this now Grade 3 Whitmore. Well, another Grade 3 race on the Oaklawn Park on Saturday was the Essex Stakes, and that was one where congratulations to Last Samurai. And this goes into a recurring theme that we've talked about now the last few weeks, how strong the Pegasus has continued to come back. That Pegasus has really turned out to be a very key race in terms of the entrants going on to do great things after that. You've had White Barrio win. You've had Last Samurai win a stakes race previously, now winning the Essex Stakes as well. You had Stiletto Boy come back to win the Santa Anita Handicap out at Santa Anita, obviously over defunded, and uh, Proxy, who were both in the Pegasus as well. So you had Simplification run third in a Grade 2 after running, I think, eighth or ninth in that race. So you've had a lot of people come back with strong efforts from that Pegasus. And obviously, Last Samurai coming back to win graded stakes competition now for back-to-back races. And credit to Classic Causeway, who was in this race as well. Classic Causeway, I thought, ran the race he needed to run, right? He got up on the lead. He's not a fast horse. We talk about this a lot. He's a quick horse. He's often very good out of the gate, but he's not fast. He doesn't have a really stunning turn of foot necessarily, but he's good at getting out in the lead and being very judicious about doling out pace. And so he was able to really control the pace. And they were able to run pretty reasonable fractions, 48 and change for the half, 112 and 3 for the opening 6 furlongs. But ultimately, when Last Samurai started unfurling that long stride of his, it was really over. And he was able to gobble up Classic Causeway, go past him, no problem. And really, the two of them separated out from the rest of the group pretty significantly. And so, credit to the Last Samurai for a back-to-back stakes win. Great ride by Oaklawn's leading jockey, Christian Torres. And they talked about this a little bit. Paul LaDuca mentioned this on FS1 on America's Day at the Races, that, Last Samurai has a really long stride and he's a big horse. And when you get a big horse like this, you don't want, it's hard to be, I don't want to say tactical, because he has tactical speed, because Last Samurai can sit really far back and go, or he can be a little bit more forwardly placed and go. But he's tough to be agile with. He's not a push button horse in that you can't just kind of like push it down and then he gives you a spurt and then you kind of hold him up again. And so he's a horse you kind of want to keep out of trouble. And so that's what Christian Torres did. Christian Torres kept him wide the entire trip, basically, and kept him 2-3 wide the whole way around, but it made sure he never got into trouble, so that when it was time for him to go, he could just go. He could slowly start unfurling that stride of his. And I think that's what makes him so effective is, once he gets rolling, then it's really hard to get him stopped. And he just showed that powerful stride there in the Essex Stakes. So congratulations to him. You figure, he's going to be heading to the handicap after this, the Oaklawn handicap, and that might be an interesting showdown. I know some people are speculating maybe Art Collector ends up going there as well. So, there's some interesting horses now suddenly in this older handicap division, with Last Samurai being one of the top that we've seen in this particular division. Well, not all of the big races were just here in the United States. Want to also give a shout out to any of our English racing fans at Cheltenham this past week. A lot of great hurdles competitions, a lot of great stakes competitions there. And the race that I wanted to highlight was, of course, one of the Tuesday races at Cheltenham, which was, of course, the Group 1 hurdles race with Constitution Hill, who is simply breathtaking. I know some of you who watch this show may not really watch hurdles very much, may not watch jump racing very often, but do yourself a favor and go back and watch Constitution Hill's performance at Cheltenham on Tuesday. If you have a TVG account, you can just go under, past race results and go find the Tuesday card at Cheltenham. I think it was actually the second race in the card, which was a Group 1 hurdles race. And it's just simply breathtaking to watch him run. It's a 2-mile race. They do 8 jumps. What is so amazing about him, and what is so noticeable immediately, even for a novice who watches jumps, you notice immediately that he makes up ground on the jumps. His jumps are so efficient. His jumps are so concise and effortless. And he uses the bare minimum effort to do it, that he makes up ground on the rest of the field every time he jumps. that if he's a length behind a horse and they both go over the jump, by the time they both clear the jump, now he's only a half length behind. If he's a half length behind, now he's only a head behind. He just always gains ground every single jump. And then the really impressive thing was after the second to last jump, when he gets asked to go, he went from a 1 length lead to a 12 length lead in about a furlong and a half at most. I mean, he just put on the afterburners and just toasted the rest of the field. It was absolutely incredible. He's got such a beautiful stride. There was an amazing picture of him winning that race, and he is fully extended over that last jump. And the flexibility that the horse has is just incredible to see how agile he is and how flexible his joints are and how flexible his legs are to be able to just be so efficient and concise with his jumps. Really breathtaking stuff. So I know I don't talk about jump racing very often. I do watch it. I don't want to say regularly. I don't want to overstate things, but I do keep up with it and I do like watching it. And Constitution Hill is one of those horses that whenever he runs, I always watch, and it's just so impressive and so great to see. So always appreciate greatness, whatever form that takes, whether it's on the flat surface or whether it's in jumps. But definitely a race worth going back and looking at if you've not had a chance to take a look at that one. Well, let's talk a little bit about some Sunday stakes action that took place. And it was a big day for Brad Cox on Sunday, actually. You had Looms Boldly, a great horse name for a great Twitter handle and a great guy with Peter. But no, I don't think anybody's going to name a horse Failed to Menace anytime soon, sadly. But the Damon Runyon Stakes up at Aqueduct, Looms Boldly beats Andiamo a Firenze. Really nice effort, and kind of surprising that Looms Boldly goes off. I think it's 6-1 for Brad Cox, and he just got to the lead, and that was as simple as the race was. I mean, he got to the lead, just put up the fractions necessary, and was able to hold off Andiamo a Firenze, who was kind of right with him the whole way around. Those two were really much the best compared to everyone else. So great effort there. Andiamo a Firenze, I love seeing the cutback for him. That's his level, man. You get him 6-7 furlongs, that's going to be his race. And I was a big fan of him as a 2-year-old. I won some money on him as a 2-year-old. But I think he's got a nice future, moving forward, just in the sprint division. And I think, they've tried to stretch him out repeatedly, and it just hasn't been working. And I think you shorten him up 6-7 furlongs, run him on those New York, listed stakes, grade 3, grade 2 races. I think that's his sweet spot. Listen, that was what his brother did. That was what Firenze Fire did too. So Andiamo Firenze absolutely should, I think, stick to that. I think that's what they're going to do, because that was a strong second place effort, I thought, that we saw from him. But congrats to Looms Boldly and Brad Cox. Now, Brad Cox also had a real nice day down at the fairgrounds on Sunday, where one of his prize 3-year-olds, Bishop's Bay, turned in, I thought, a very nice effort in an allowance optional claiming race down there. Bishop's Bay had just broken his maiden last time out. This was a second career race, and he's a horse that a lot of people have speculated maybe is on the Derby trail, if not maybe a Triple Crown horse in some way. So he runs today. He runs on Sunday, the 19th. Seems unlikely that they would wheel him back in the Bluegrass, because here's the thing. Bishop's Bay goes off as the 2-5 favorite, runs a very nice race, sits off the speed of Steve Asmussen's horse, First Defender, most of the way around, then kicks for home, gets past First Defender, but then Cox's other entry in the race, Demolition Duke, kind of comes up and tries to challenge Bishop's Bay. Bishop's Bay really digs in the last 100 yards or so and holds off Demolition Duke. Like I said, very professional effort for only a second career start for Bishop's Bay. Now the question is, where does he go from here? I've seen some people go, well, maybe he's going to go to the Bluegrass, because that's in 3 weeks essentially. Maybe he would do that. I don't know. That seems like a really aggressive and tight turnaround and potentially a really tough field. So I just don't have a ton of confidence that that's necessarily where they would go. I've seen some people mention maybe you should go to the Lexington, which is right before the Kentucky Derby, and then actually run in the Preakness instead. That he might be more of like, don't worry about the Derby, maybe run in the Preakness, and then maybe focus on the summer up at Saratoga after that. And maybe not even worry about the Belmont, maybe just be a Preakness horse. But he's definitely a horse that you need to pay attention to. He's a horse with talent, and any horse that steps up to a solid allowance optional claiming race after one maiden run and goes 2 turns the first time and shows the sort of determination that the horse showed that last 100 yards in particular, really wanting to get the win, I think is promising. So another strong entry for one of the many that Brad Cox has in his stable right now. But big Sunday there for Brad Cox. Well, let's talk about some news that's taking place with some different horses, not on the racetrack, but on the workout track. And there's 2 horses that had some notable workouts this past weekend. One is Cave Rock for Bob Baffert, logging a 7 furlong work. You do not see that very often, but Baffert is known for putting out these really long works. Now, what's interesting is that, of course, Cave Rock is still under the care of Baffert and is therefore not eligible to earn any Kentucky Derby points. However, it does not prevent him from being entered in a potential Kentucky Derby prep race. He could still very well be entered in the Santa Anita Derby. He just would not earn any points for that. And he would kind of muck up the machinations a little bit and the way that the points are allotted to everybody else. Because if he were to run and potentially win, then he's taking points away from those other horses that would have finished in that spot otherwise. So it's very interesting to see the politics going on right now. Now, is he going to be running in that Santa Anita Derby? Nothing to this point has made me think that he will, but it's possible. And that 7 furlong work he's getting him ready for something. That's for sure. That is a telltale Baffert sign of you do an extra long workout, then you come back with a 5 furlong or a sharp 4 furlong workout, and then you're kind of cranked up and ready to go for whatever you're doing. He did that with Reincarnate right before Reincarnate switched barns to Tim Yakteen. And so he's done that before where he does like these strong, like 6, and then he cuts back to 5, and then you go to the race. So it's interesting to see what's going to happen there. But that was some big news. The other big news was Extron Yeho. Very, very promising 2-year-old for Steve Asmussen, I should say, who got back on the workout tab and did only log to 52 and change 4 furlong work, so it wasn't anything blistering, but this was an extremely promising 2-year-old who we have not seen on the workout tab at all. So it's just great to see him back on the workout tab, great to see him healthy and getting back out there. Hopefully we get to see Akshay Yeho as a 3-year-old racing, because he showed big time talent as a 2-year-old, posted a huge buyer speed figure in debut. So very excited for the possibility of him returning to the track in the next few months. Well, let's also talk about some trainer news, and let's talk a little bit about the continued anomalous performances coming out of the state of New York. Last weekend, I brought up the fact that Rob Atras had won 9 of his 10 races at one point. Not to be outdone, Linda Rice at one point won 10 of her last 12 entries in New York at Aqueduct. Absolutely incredible effort. Linda, of course, is still potentially going to be serving a suspension for administering illegal substances to her horses. And that suspension is still in the process of being served. So that suspension has not yet started, but she's obviously winning a lot of races up there. We also saw a race on Sunday with a victory from a horse, Street Boss, who, that race and that performance just baffles the mind. It just baffles the mind in the senses. It's a turf horse who's running on dirt, and the horse is up on a super contentious 3-horse lead where they're setting incredible early fractions. The 2 horses that are coming from behind loom up to the Street Boss, who the other 2 speed horses absolutely fade into oblivion. The 2 coming from the back loom up, and Street Boss just keeps finding more at 35-1 and gets a big win there. And it's one of those performances that just makes you scratch your head. And there's just nothing on paper that would indicate the horse is capable of running that way. The horse never won on dirt before. It's a turf horse. And even as a turf horse, not that, not that extraordinary of a turf horse by any stretch. And we continue to see, again, these anomalous results up in New York. And it just makes you scratch your head sometimes about what's going on there with some of the trainers, or with, maybe sometimes with the way the track's playing. That's something that, to be perfectly fair to everyone, the track can sometimes produce very anomalous results. And that's something where sometimes you get the inside rail. It can be very, very beneficial to you of an Aqueduct. And certainly he was on that inside rail with Street Boss. So we'll see. But, like I said, continued anomalous performances out of New York where you just scratch your head after looking at the PPs and doing as much handicapping as you can. And you go, where did that performance come from? Where did that number come from? Where does this speed suddenly come from? pretty amazing that a lot of this stuff is happening. So we'll see what happens up there. We'll continue to keep you posted if there's more anomalous results. Now, one of the trainers that I mentioned previously about Cave Rock was, of course, Bob Baffert. And I mentioned that he could kind of muck up things by entering a horse in the Santa Anita Derby. And you might go, oh, well, Bob wouldn't do that. Well, indeed, he is doing it this coming weekend. He has entered a horse in both the Sunland Park Derby and the Sunland Park Oaks. And for those people who may not be familiar with that race, those are both Kentucky Derby prep races, or Kentucky Derby and Kentucky Oaks prep races, respectively, that are worthy of points. So he is very much so, like I said, getting involved in the Derby trail, even if his horses are not eligible to run or earn points in toward being in the Kentucky Derby or the Kentucky Oaks. So he is getting in there and entering those horses. Now, what's interesting is he enters a horse into the Kentucky or the Sunland Park Derby. Now, another horse, and probably the morning line favorite, they haven't released the morning line yet for that. They drew the field, but they didn't post the morning line. The likely morning line favorite is probably Fort Bragg, who was a former Baffert horse who now runs for Tim Yakteen. So if you are the owner of Fort Bragg, you're probably wondering, hey, listen, why is Bob entering one of his other horses to potentially try to beat my horse and his former horse that he trained? And it's a lot of craziness. And so I just encourage you all to continue to pay attention to what's going on out in California, what's going on potentially in West Texas and in New Mexico with the Sunland Park Derby. And so that's something to continue to pay attention to out with that race. But we'll have more coverage of the Sunland Park Derby and the Sunland Park Oaks here on the Trust the Profits Network this week. Now, another big trainer who I mentioned earlier is Brad Cox, and he has got a slew of horses, but we're starting to get a sense of where they're going to be going. So this coming weekend, we are going to see Instant Coffee, Tappett's Conquest, and Jace's Road run in the Louisiana Derby. Jace's Road kind of hasn't been seen in a little while, or hasn't really been on the front of people's minds. This is a horse that's actually pretty nice, and it's only 2 bad performances have come in the slop. Bad news, rains in the forecast for New Orleans this Saturday. Instant Coffee, a horse we've not seen since the Lecomte, has somehow become one of the top 3 or 4 names in the Derby Trail, even though he's not running over 2 months. So it'll be interesting to see his return to the track. Angel Empire is slated to run in the Arkansas Derby, while Hit Show and Slip Mahoney are both going to be running in the Wood Memorial, verifying running in the Bluegrass. This is a lot of things to keep straight. Victory Formation appears to be off the Kentucky Derby Trail. Eyeing Clover, we will see. No official announcements yet. I would imagine if that horse runs anywhere, will run at the Wood Memorial in New York, because that's where the horse ran in the Gotham. And I thought ran actually halfway decent in the Gotham, finished 4th, but was part of a super aggressive pace. So a lot of moving parts there with the Cox connections and the Cox barn. But one of the things that we are going to be doing, myself and Colin Sheehan, we're going to be doing a Kentucky Derby, Kentucky Oaks barn tour. Once all of the preps are done, we're going to go barn by barn and talk about all of the main contenders in those barns for the Derby and the Oaks Trail. We're going to provide some context about the trainers' successes and past successes at the Kentucky Derby, at the Kentucky Oaks. So a little bit of pedigree talk, perhaps, and some talk of just which are their strongest contenders and what are some strengths and weaknesses of each of these different entries. Well, let's shift to some news in terms of what's going on behind the track in terms of finances. And the news came out earlier this week that Kentucky Downs announced a 1% increase in takeout rates, which is not very good news for bettors, while also announcing that purse money in maiden special weights are going to increase to nearly $150,000. That's right, $150,000 maiden special weight races. That is absolutely bonkers, because most listed stakes races that we all see, whether they're at a main track or whether they're at a secondary or tertiary track, are far less than $150,000 purse. So to have $150,000 made special weight races just seems absolutely nuts. And then you're also increasing the takeout on bettors. Kentucky Downs still has a relatively low takeout rate, no doubt about it, but the increase, while also announcing an increase in purse money, that certainly did not strike a lot of people the right way. Now, what did strike people the right way is Hawthorne. Hawthorne announced that they are reducing takeout to 12% for all win play show bets. Obviously, as the name of the show would indicate, I'm a fan of this. Anything that helps the win play show is always better. But Oh, one is love to see that. Love to see what Hawthorne's doing, trying to reduce takeout rates. We always want to support tracks that do that, and that's one of the real sad points about Sam Houston and everything that's gone on in Texas with HISA and everything happening with Sam Houston. Is Sam Houston had great takeout rates. Colonial has pretty good takeout rates. I mean, there's some tracks that I think try to do right by the betters, and we try to reward those tracks by emphasizing, hey, these are really profitable places to go and play. You get more bang for your buck, etc. So good news for Hawthorne. A little upsetting news for Kentucky Downs. Like I said, they still have a relatively low takeout rate compared to other tracks, but still something to keep an eye on. Now let's talk a little bit about jockey news before we wrap up this week. And there was a little bit of bad news coming out of Tampa. Pablo Morales, jockey there, is out for the rest of the Tampa Bay meet. He has a very serious finger injury, and it's possible that his finger might end up having to be amputated. His one index finger it almost was completely ripped off, and during a riding accident. And they are performing surgery, going to try to save the finger, but he is in for a very long recovery, obviously, and he's out from riding the rest of the season. So, well, obviously, we wish best wishes to Pablo and his family, and certainly a speedy recovery for him. Hopefully, get back on the track. One of the better jockeys, I think, down at Tampa, and one that I was like following. Now, a good day on Sunday for Keith Asmussen, Steve's son, who got his first riding triple. So many congratulations to him as he picked up 3 wins on the Sunday card at Oaklawn Park. Always good to see another Asmussen doing well. And then I think the feel-good story of the day was probably Yoel Navas aboard Captain Jack down Sunday in Gulfstream Park for Ian Wilkes, getting his first win ever. Navas had been an exercise rider for Ian Wilkes for the last 3 years, finally gets his first shot aboard Captain Jack and gets the win on Sunday. Very awesome moment. It's great to see, you see all the jockeys with those big, you know, uh, barrels of water, throwing them on Navas to celebrate afterwards. It's a beautiful moment. It's a great tradition that jockeys have. It's just a lot of fun to see, and obviously feel great for Navas, and hope that's just one of many, many more to come. Well, speaking of more to come, we have a ton of more coverage for you here on Trust the Profits. We have stuff coming up this week. We have the first look for the Louisiana Derby with myself and Colin Sheehan. I'm going to have a Dubai World Cup and United Arab Emirates Derby preview. I'm also going to have capping the card. Going to be joined by Scott Shapiro of Twin Spires. That's going to be very exciting. Can't wait for that to happen. So excited for Scott to come on. And we're going to do capping the card together for Fairgrounds on Saturday. That is a 15 race card. That is absolutely insane. But we're going to do some of it. And then I'm going to have Caitlin Free on. We're going to talk about the Turfway Stakes preview, because we got not only the Jeff Ruby Stakes, but we have the Bourbonnette Oaks. We have a lot of different races there. We have the Kentucky Classic as well. So a lot of great races there at Turfway Park this week. We're going to be previewing those. Colin's got Doubling Down. He's got some great guests lined up there. I think he's got Kevin Kilroy from the Fairgrounds lined up for that. You got Formula is going to be doing some graded stakes previews. You have El Hombre on Thursday nights in the lounge. It's going to be a blast this week. So we got so much coverage for you. Make sure to press that subscribe button. Well, that's going to do it for us this week on the Win Play Show. Make sure to follow me on Twitter at the handle @FailedToMenace to keep up with all the latest horse racing news that I'm putting out. And make sure to subscribe to Trust the Profits here on YouTube. Well, until next time, friends, my name is Matthew DeSantis, wishing you a great and prosperous day at the races, and reminding you that it's now post time.